Hi, this is Dan from Tornado Talk. Please take a moment to go to our website, tornadotalk.com, and click Support the Show on the menu. As you know, we offer this podcast free, but it is not free to produce. We accrue monthly costs, including writing, researching, recording, editing, and producing. Now, if you click the donate button on that page, you can help us underwrite the cause. That's tornadotalk.com. Click Support the Show on the menu, and then you'll see the donate button. And thank you in advance.
This is Tornado Talk, a podcast about one of nature's most fascinating phenomenon. Share your tornado story with us by email, Jen and Dan at tornadotalk.com. That's Jen and Dan at tornadotalk.com. Now, meteorologists Jennifer Naramore and Dan Holliday. Tornado Talk is on.
After 12 months of tornadoes in 2016,
the Tornado Talk team compiled data, figures, and facts, then gathered your opinions.
And these are the top 10 tornado events of 2016.
Number 10.
On Thursday, July 7th, 2016, a unique summertime setup led to severe weather across southeast Kansas. Chance Hayes is the warning coordination meteorologist at the National Weather Service in Wichita.
We had a surface low pressure center centered over south central Kansas, and we had numerous outflow boundaries oriented eastward across central and eastern Kansas. And basically what happens whenever you get those outflow boundaries, it creates an area of convergence. And when we talk about convergence, that means an area where air is going to rise. And anytime you get rising air and you have what we call instability, which is also rising air, you have different levels of instability. It could be weak, meaning the air is not going to rise very rapidly, or it could be strong instability where the air is going to rise violently or very quickly. And in this case, we had an enormous amounts of instability or the ability for the air to rise very violently just off to the north and east of the surface low pressure center along those outflow boundaries. And when those conditions came together just right, it was just like a powder keg for these thunderstorms to develop.
Taylor Wright, James Wilson, and Jacob Asherman had made the decision to go storm chasing that day and waited nearby for big storms to produce tornadoes.
As we were sitting in Rosalia, just west of Eureka, we saw towers going up really rapidly from a storm that had just gone up near Emporia. And we knew with the environment the way it was, at that point the tornado parameters were almost, maxed out because Cape had been much higher than what was forecast, and there's lots of low-level shear you need for tornadoes. So we were sitting in Rosalia, and we saw that storm by Emporia. But as we headed north, a new storm formed to its southwest as that one died off near Matfield Green. So once we saw that, we knew that the storm definitely had a good potential for tornadoes, but we ultimately ended up northeast of Tedderville, and we sat there and a wall cloud formed, and once that wall cloud started spinning, I figured tornadoes were imminent.
Taylor was right. That night after dark, the tornado threat increased, putting Eureka, Kansas in the path of danger. He and his team recalls what they witnessed when a nighttime tornado was on the ground.
As we entered into the north side of town, we started getting some very heavy winds that kind of resembled tornado circulation, and then all of a sudden we started seeing these bright power flashes out our back window, and we knew there was a tornado almost directly behind us. So that's when we couldn't actually see the tornado at that point, but that's when we kind of got just east of town and started seeing the tornado go right through the town.
Nick Ball is a resident of Eureka, Kansas. He watched the flashes of lightning from his front porch that night and grabbed his phone to record the video. The next 9 minutes would capture the eerie sound of tornadic winds.
Like when the transformers exploded in the video, I tried to use that as best to try to gauge what was going on. But quite honestly, unless it was blowing past right in front of me, I did not see all that much. The best way I could describe it, all I heard was 10. I heard 10 flying, but I couldn't really tell exactly where it was coming from. But with the elevator, like I say, right across the street, and just about every bit of their building is nothing but sheet metal, I figured it had to be coming from there. When the action picks up in the video, when the wind really starts to pick up, and especially the piece of sheet metal that wrapped around the pole on my front porch, that's when I realized that we're in a lot deeper situation.
Rusty Bittler is the Assistant Emergency Management Director in Greenwood County, Kansas. He believes even though there was some damage within the community, Eureka dodged a bullet that night.
We had a spot where it was on Main Street between 11th and 12th, where we had a lot of roofs missing. We had some buildings that were basically gutted. We didn't have any completely on the ground in that area. Towards the middle of town, towards that grain elevator, we had a trailer home park where there was 4 or 5 trailer homes that were completely gutted and on the ground. Trees up, twisted around. The grain elevator had 2 buildings, I believe, that were completely destroyed. Of course, one was on the roadway. Lots of roofs gone, lots of tree damage, things like that. Little outbuildings gone. Very, very fortunate the tornado that occurred northwest of Eureka did not occur in the city limits of Eureka, or I think it'd be a completely different story.
Chance Hayes from the National Weather Service agrees that it could have been worse. His team surveyed the damage and rated the tornadoes.
And it was just kind of awe-inspiring just to sit back and look at the damage and realize how fortunate the folks in the city of Eureka were, that there were no injuries and there were no fatalities. Even if there wasn't a lot of structural damage where the homes were completely wiped out in the community, the trees falling on the homes, or if folks happened to be outside or in their vehicles, the trees falling on them really could have caused problems. And then once we made it through the community of Eureka and we came back and gave that a preliminary rating of an EF2, we continued on to the northwest where we knew that there was another tornado touchdown and another home that had been hit by the tornado. And once we got to that site, we recognized very quickly that it was a much stronger tornado. The path width was much wider, and the tree damage was much more significant, and the home was completely wiped off of its foundation at that point in time. And we spent some time there really assessing the construction of the home, and based on the home's construction and the level of tree damage, we assessed that with the high-end EF3 tornado. And then there was another one off to the northwest up near Otis Creek Reservoir, which is on private land up there, and right in the middle of the Flint Hills, so it's very difficult to detect what actually happened from that Otis Creek Reservoir to where the home sustained the EF3 damage.
Only 4 other EF3 tornadoes have occurred in July in the state of Kansas since 1950. In addition to this EF3, there was also an EF2 twister. July 7th, the Eureka and Greenwood County, Kansas storms ranked as the 10th biggest tornado event of 2016.
Number 9.
On May 7th, 4 confirmed tornadoes touched down across eastern Colorado. They occurred near Hart Spring, Eckley, and near the town of Ray. Video of the storms went viral and became one of the most viewed and talked about tornado events of the spring. Jeff Magnum, Jeremy Heyman, and Gabe Cox are 3 friends who founded Tornado Trackers. They met in church and learned they shared a passion for severe storms and tornadoes.
Gabe Cox says he was in Colorado on May 7th and witnessed the series of tornadoes up close.
I actually arrived in Oklahoma the night before and met up with my chase partner for that day, Scott Peak. And he and I that night were debating on whether or not to go because the atmospheric conditions weren't that great for tornadoes on May 7th, and it was going to be a long haul that night if we were going to do it. But we decided, you know what, let's do it. We're both together. Let's just do this and see what happens. So we showed up in Colorado. The day was slow to take off for a while there in the afternoon. We didn't think we were going to see anything. Actually, before the Ray, Colorado tornado, there was a tornado in Eckley, Colorado that most people don't discuss because Ray pretty much overshadows it. But the Eckley tornado was actually a really gorgeous tornado also. It happened in a nature preserve, so there weren't many roads to get to the tornado. But Scott and I managed to find one dirt road that took us to within a quarter mile of the tornado as it roped out. And it was probably one of the most gorgeous rope outs I have ever seen. The top of the tornado was directly overhead, and then it snaked down to about a quarter mile away in a field. And it was just really surreal. It was a very quiet area because we were in a nature preserve. You could hear the birds chirping, you could hear the breeze through the brush, and then you could hear this waterfall sound of this tornado spinning just a quarter mile away. And that lasted probably for about 15 minutes. We were excited. We were thrilled with the tornado we had seen. And we started heading down the road towards Ray.
High Plains Magic.
Because we noticed another supercell approaching the highway. And Ray is only about 15 minutes away from Eckley, so we didn't have very far to go. And we got there in time to see a brief tornado just before the Ray, Colorado tornado started. That one was really brief. I don't think it caused any damage. I'm not even sure it showed up on the official report. After that, we noticed the funnel forming, and we were able to track the Ray, Colorado from its birth to when it roped out, which was an incredible chase. So one of the most stunning things that I think everyone notices right off when they see any videos or pictures of the Ray tornado are the colors. Colorado, the dust in Colorado is a very rich red brick color, and that in contrast with the deep blues and greens of the storm, as well as the white collar clouds, the cloud material that was spinning around the very top of the tornado, created such an amazing contrast, and it was an absolutely beautiful tornado. Luck would have it that the tornado traveled down a highway for about a 2 or 3 mile stretch, and we were able to follow directly behind it. I mean, it followed the path of the highway exactly, and that allowed us to get up close enough. The path of the tornado happened to line up with a highway in Ray that we were able to drive down, and we were safely following the tornado from behind. It was constantly moving away from us. At one moment, the tornado stopped and was stationary for about 2 or 3 minutes. And so when the tornado stopped, we stopped. But this road network just happened to work out where we could come right up to the tornado and just really feel the power of this. It was an EF2, but when we were within a quarter mile of it, it just felt massive. It wasn't a very wide tornado. I think that it was officially rated as about a quarter mile wide, but when you're there and it takes up your entire periphery, it just feels enormous. And the sound was just absolutely stunning. Whistle, there was wind blowing through the power line, so you had that eerie, ghostly whistle nearby, and then this deep, rushing waterfall sound of the tornado. It was just digging up the plains in front of us. And so we were able to take some side roads and follow it a little further. Once the contrast started to fade, it became a little more rain-wrapped. We got into some hail, but we were able to track with it down a dirt road and watched it rope out in a field about a half a mile away.
Social media went rampant with another image of the tornado when high school students Charlie Bator and his girlfriend Allie were headed to prom. The two grabbed a quick selfie with a tornado in the background. They posted the image on Facebook and had everyone buzzing worldwide.
I had a track meet that day, and then I had to go to work. And then on my way after work around 6 o'clock, I was headed up to Ray to go to Allie's prom. And I noticed it was kind of stormy and stuff. I got up there. There were storm chasers all over. There's a little valley called the Black Wolf, and there was storm chasers all over up there. And I was thinking that's kind of weird. It didn't really look like it was going to storm really bad. And then I got to Allie's, and the wind started to pick up, and it started to hail. And then the alarm for the tornado went off. And we all started to go back towards inside because we were getting ready to take some prom pictures and take off to go eat. And then after that, the alarm just shut off. It was dead silent, and then the wind started picking up really, really fast. And I could lean over into the wind at a 45-degree angle and could stay upright because of that wind. And then it just stopped, and it was dead silent. And then the clouds went away, and the tornado went away, or the beginnings of the tornado went away. And then after that, it picked up 3 miles north of us, and we started watching it. And we watched it, and I got it all on video and stuff. It started to go away, and then the tornado siren came back on for just a blip of a second. And then after that, we went back outside, and the tornado was starting to go away. And then Allie's mom, Heidi, said, "Oh, we should have got a picture in front of that tornado." I don't know what made it happen. I guess it was just luck. The tornado kind of came back, and it didn't die right away, and we went and stood in front of it and took our picture. It was definitely one for the books. It's one that I'll remember for the rest of my life for sure.
That tornado rated as an EF2. It was on the ground for 8 miles and at one time was 440 yards wide. The other 3 twisters were marked EF0. The Ray, Colorado tornado event is the 9th biggest of 2016.
Number 8.
At a time when so few think of tornadoes, one of the worst outbreaks occurred in late fall 2016. From November 27th through November 30th, there were 46 tornadoes across the central and southern U.S. On November 29th, the Storm Prediction Center issued a moderate risk for central Mississippi, parts of Louisiana, Alabama, and Tennessee.
The worst round of severe weather occurred after dark. Powerful storms pushed into Alabama, producing tornadoes. One person was injured near Belgreen when a twister did EF2 damage. EF2 tornadoes also occurred in Winston County, damaging multiple homes. The eastern part of Huntsville was struck. Then some of the strongest storms moved through, spinning up significant EF3 tornadoes near Danville and Neal.
Just after midnight on November 30th, a monster EF3 tornado ripped through the town of Rosalie, killing 3 and injuring 10 others. The tornado destroyed homes, churches, and businesses, and completely leveled a shopping plaza in Rosalie, Alabama. Jackson County Sheriff Chuck Phillips spoke to WDEF-TV.
The injuries and the fatalities all was from one home. It was a mobile home that was hit. Apparently it was a direct hit. It was destroyed. I think a small child and adult was injured and was taken to Erlanger, and we had 3 adults that was fatalities.
A daycare center near Eider was reduced to a concrete slab. Another EF3 twister severely damaged the town of Ocoee, Tennessee. WDEF-TV's Eric Avigné reported from the scene.
Off in the distance, it is what used to be the post office here in Ocoee. It has been destroyed. Just behind that is a fire station, a $100,000 fire station. From what we understand, is fairly new. That has also been destroyed.
Before the storm system came to an end, several brief tornadoes also impacted Atlanta, Georgia.
The National Weather Service says a high-end EF2 tornado struck Athens, Tennessee. It destroyed businesses and homes. Mayor John Gentry addressed WJHL-TV and the media after viewing the damage in his community.
While we have no reported casualties in McMinn County at this time, at least 20 people were injured from the storm, and we estimate over 30 structures have been damaged or destroyed. That includes private residence and commercial.
The tornado outbreak that produced 46 tornadoes between November 27th and 30th, with the greatest concentration of severe weather on November 29th and 30th, is our 8th biggest tornado event of 2016.
Number 7.
There's a familiar saying that a tornado can strike at any time of the day or night, any day of the year, and any place in the country. On October 14th, 2016, residents in coastal Oregon found that to be true.
Holly Lawrence is a professional editor and collaborative writer who works from her home in Manzanita, Oregon. Holly is also a single mom who is raising her 10-year-old son, Augie. She said that she and Augie had practiced for tsunamis many times since they lived just 2 blocks from the beach. Never had they planned for what was about to happen that day.
And on that morning, which was a Friday, he happened to not have school, and he was sitting on the couch. I think he was reading a book or he was playing a video game. And I was in the kitchen, and the kitchen is open to the living room. And I was standing there in my pajamas getting soups ready because we were supposed to have a huge storm come in that night with really big winds, but not a tornado, just our average winter storm here on the ocean. And we're used to losing power, so I wanted to make sure we were prepared for that. My phone was sitting next to my son. His name is Augie, and it started beeping in this very odd way. It was nothing I'd ever heard. I'd heard other alerts on my phone, but this, and it kept going off. And so he brought it to me, and he's like, "Mom, this says that we have a tornado. It's imminent. Take shelter." And I looked at it and I said, "Oh my gosh, someone is going to lose their job because this is ridiculous. We don't have tornadoes here." But then it continued to go off, and that was at 8:17. And after a couple of seconds, I said, "Okay, let's go get dressed and we'll go downstairs because our upstairs is totally unprotected." I mean, if there was a tornado to hit, which again I thought was ridiculous, I knew we would not be safe up here. So I threw him some boots and a sweater to put on, and then I went into my room and I got dressed. And as I was coming back out of my room and into the living room, and this is where I get emotional every time, the windows all blew out. And sorry, I know I should be able to talk about this more easily now since I've told this story a million times. If it hadn't been for the alert, we were behind a half wall. He was standing behind the half wall pulling on his boots. And if it hadn't been for the alert, he would have been right in front of the windows that blew out. And the glass pierced the walls. So it was enough that it was obviously high speed. And there was 2 different types of glass. One of the windows was not tempered, and that was the one that was piercing the wall, of course. And then the other was the sliding glass doors, which were broke away like they're supposed to, the safety glass. And they actually were picked up, and they were swirling around our room. And, so glass and sand were hitting us. And yet, we did not get hurt. Now, it sounded like the tornado, it was hitting the back of the apartment, and it was tugging on the roof. And I thought the back rooms had been ripped away. So I didn't want to go back in there. And the only other way to get out of it was to go out our front door. And the tornado was behind us. And I got out the front door, and Augie was right in front of me. And he was lifted a little bit off the ground, which I'm pretty sure I never want to see that again for the rest of my life. And there was a tree that was being torn out of the ground right next to us. And so there was also a metal railing that was bolted into the wall, and I was holding him to that. And it was just down one short flight of stairs, and it was under. The tornado that was pulling up the tree was about 20 feet away, maybe a little bit closer. And it was really the winds from up above that were tugging it up. But we got downstairs and into the bakery door, which is right below us, and they're much more protected. It's a big, solid old building, especially that floor. And so we were in there, and we were able to get behind a bar. And then the tornado by then was past. And it was funny, the people that were downstairs in the bakery, it's not open in the back, and they heard all the noise, but they had no idea what had happened, and they were all just still quietly drinking their coffee, looking at us like we were crazy as we are, crawling behind the bar, and we're covered in sand. And we were fine. We didn't have, I had like one scratch on the bottom of my foot because I didn't have shoes on. That was it. And we were just extremely lucky.
A tornado had hit Manzanita, Oregon. Holly and her son had no idea what was next. She knew after sustaining damage at her apartment, they had to get out and find a safer place to wait out the storm.
I made the decision, actually, to take my son across the street to a tavern because they didn't have any windows. And the bakery that's below us, they actually... The front side is windows. And so I was just afraid if another tornado came and it came through and at a different angle or on a different path, it might blow out those windows. And I didn't want to go through that again. So I actually ran him across the street. For the second time in his life, got to spend the time in a tavern. The first time was a much longer, funnier story. But so he's a 10-year-old. He's already been hanging out in bars. But this was a safe place. They have a couple of back rooms that are totally enclosed, and it's a really old, heavy building, and there was places to get under, places that were safe.
Even though the worst of the storms had hit coastal Oregon, authorities were concerned for more severe weather and asked residents to leave town.
So my car was right across the street, and it was cleared to get out, and so I loaded up a bunch of people, and we drove out of town to some friend's house that I knew had a bunch of generators, actually, and their house ran on propane. So that was nice. I spent the day there since everywhere else the power was out.
As Holly thinks back about what a close call it was for she and her son Augie, the alerts on her phone were the clue to heed warning. For that, she's forever grateful.
If it hadn't been for the alerts that we got, even if it was only a 1-minute warning, I know Augie and I we definitely wouldn't have survived it because we were standing right there in front of the windows. I think other people feel the same, that were in their houses. They all, one man had time to run into his room and dive under a bed. And for Manzanita, it was like 3 minutes of craziness, and then the rest of the day we were all just in shock. And we were also still waiting for this huge storm that was supposed to hit that luckily didn't. It did rain and there were some high winds, but nothing what we expected, which is good because there were power lines down everywhere, and we lost hundreds and hundreds of trees, huge old firs and pines. This town is just lined with trees, and those were all laying around, and so big limbs were laying around. The house right behind me, literally like 20 feet behind me, there was a tree that pierced the side like a spear or an arrow into the side of a deer or something. Instead, it was this huge tree pierced the side of the house sideways. There were trees behind me that were upside down, had flown in from somewhere else, and that's what it was like all along the path of the tornado. Or there would be a swath of trees where the tornado just sheared off the tops of all of these trees, like someone took a chainsaw and ran it across the top of 10 trees, but it was all 20 feet up, and then they were shorn off. And we do have storms here, but that usually the trees just fall over, so it's not uncommon for us to have that kind of damage, but nothing to this extent or in such a short amount of time.
The threat of tsunamis is far greater than tornadoes in Manzanita, which has a population of less than 600 in northwestern Oregon. But in any disaster, Holly found out her community rallied to help those in need.
We were lucky if we had to have a tornado hit. I'm lucky we live in Manzanita. Everybody reached out to us. So my windows were boarded up by that late afternoon. The people that own the building were extremely worried and have really chased down the insurance companies to replace the windows as soon as possible. And they had to replace all the carpets. And, I had to throw everything away in the kitchen, all my appliances and all the food. And still to this day, as I open up my cupboards, even though they had an industrial vacuum cleaner all through here, and I've vacuumed a billion times every cabinet, still every time I open it, little tiny pieces of glass will shimmy out from inside cracks somewhere. And so I'm still always rinsing off my plates every time I use them, just in case.
The tornado was truly a rarity for early fall in Oregon, but Holly says living through it has gained her a newfound respect for what tornadoes can do and for the people who live through them each year.
I really feel for people. Before, it just seemed like such a distant event. And not that I didn't feel for them before, but it's definitely, I understand the terror and how long it lasts. This was October 14th, and still now anytime it's slightly windy or I see broken glass, I'm really on edge. My son still has nightmares. I guess a greater respect for people that are going through that kind of trauma now, and I hope that they all have the same kind of community support that we do here.
The EF2 Manzanita, Oregon tornado of October 14th. It ranks as the 7th biggest tornado event of 2016.
Number 6.
In Kansas, there are typically more tornadoes that occur in May than any other time of the year. That's because strong cold fronts clash with warm, moist air. Influenced by a strong jet stream and upper air disturbances, the Sunflower State is a playground for severe weather in late spring. On May 24th, that scenario unfolded in western Kansas.
Between 12 and 15 tornadoes rumbled through parts of the plains that afternoon, including 5 EF3 twisters. Larry Ruthie is the meteorologist in charge at the National Weather Service in Dodge City, Kansas. He says it was an outflow boundary that played a big role in producing tornado activity that day.
And it was that boundary that really enhanced the low-level flow. We had strong east to southeast flow that developed behind that boundary during the afternoon hours, and the draw line propagated east during the daytime hours into far southwestern Kansas. So it's kind of a triple point with a subsynoptic area of low pressure that developed over southwest Kansas, with a really intense area of low-level shear that evolved from south central Kansas on up toward Scott County. And then the thunderstorms developed during the late afternoon hours, starting around 4 o'clock up in Scott County. We had a first tornado report just a little before 4 o'clock up in Scott County. That one area of thunderstorms moved across Scott and Lane into Ness County. And our first, we had 2 or 3 tornadoes reported, relatively weak ones across Scott into Lane County. But the first significant tornado of the day was the one that developed in the southwestern part of Ness County as an EF3 tornado. That was around 6:15, 6:25, that time frame. And that moved off toward the northeast. And at the same time that was going on, we had other thunderstorms that started to develop with the next cluster down in Ford County.
Meteorologist and storm chaser Matt Crowther was also one of the many who were observing Mother Nature on May 24th, 2016.
We headed over toward Meade, Kansas, which is in the southwest corner of the state, and we saw a little towering cumulus go up like right overhead of us. And we knew this was in the area where, there was a chance of some pretty good storms. So we basically just kind of followed that. And then when we got up near Mineola, Kansas, we stopped. And there was a lot of chases. Well, there were a lot of chases on that storm. That's whole nother story. But anyway, it produced the first tornado to our northwest, and we just followed it up the highway right toward Dodge City and saw probably 10 tornadoes. It was one of the few times I almost lost count. It's the second number of tornadoes I've ever seen. The first I saw 12 tornadoes on May 3rd, 1999, the day that Moore, Oklahoma got hit. And I saw 12 tornadoes that day. So this is the second most tornadoes I've ever seen. And it was a pretty amazing system. One tornado would form and then kind of recede off in the northwest, and another one formed to its southeast. And that process happened about 3 times. But that was one of the more. That's the most tornadoes I've ever seen from one cell. On May 3rd, 1999, we saw 12 tornadoes from 3 different storms, which is usually the case if you see multiple tornadoes in a day. To see one with one supercell is pretty amazing. There's a lot of long-time chases that said they never saw anything like that before. People that have been chasing longer than me.
Harrison Sienkiewicz and his storm chase partner Danny Welch worked their way from Buffalo, Oklahoma to Mineola, Kansas. They were out in the field as severe weather began unfolding.
We got in our truck and continued to travel north on Highway 283, and we saw our first funnel cloud. And it lingered for about 30 to 60 seconds before finally touching down. And as that happened, there was a secondary funnel immediately to its right that began to form. So we had a rope tornado to the left, and kind of it was like a needle funnel, if you will, to the right. And we had twin tornadoes almost right away.
Harrison said the twin tornadoes were the first of 4 sets. As the tornadoes approached Dodge City from the south, Larry Ruthie and his team grew concerned that the city was in danger and issued a rare tornado emergency.
Being able to look out the window west of the office and see this unbelievably intense wall cloud with tornadoes, it's kind of it's a frightening and an humbling experience. And we were actually had some discussion whether we needed to take emergency precautions and proceed to our safe room, and decided everything was going to pass west of Dodge City. That's kind of what we get paid to do. But there was a sense of fear and concern that it would hit western Dodge City. And many of us have families that and relatives and friends that live on the west side of town, and there's that concern of people we really know and are acquainted with, and family members could be killed or injured by this thing. And so there's a heightened level of concern when something like that happens.
As sirens were sounding in communities across southwest Kansas, Harrison Sienkiewicz and Danny Welch continued to watch the fascinating yet frightening situation right in front of them.
The drill bit tornado started the rope out, and we had this very large multi-vortex tornado that's just churning across the landscape. It's coming up on the vicinity of southwest Dodge City.
This is not good. RFD starting to wrap around. These tornadoes may become rain wrap before they get into Dodge. They're not going to see them humming. Yeah, they're not going to see them coming at all.
And traveling on Highway 400, I couldn't record video. I couldn't take photos anymore because I was so drawn in to what was happening. And it was the first time that I actually got scared, thinking what is about to happen to Dodge City. Watching that drill bit tornado with the horizontal vortices go towards southwest Dodge City, my stomach dropped. Like, it was no longer about observing what was going on. I was just thinking. I could not stop thinking, oh my God, people are in the path of this thing, and it's going right towards Dodge City. It was such a helpless feeling watching this violent tornado go toward town.
Dodge City was spared from a direct hit, but nearby damage brought the chase to a halt. It quickly moved from reporting to rescue mode. Harrison and Danny were in the right place to help.
And all of a sudden I see this house. The roof is gone. The brick frame walls collapsed. One was blown in. And I just shouted to my friend that just stop the truck right now. And we got out of the truck, and we see this woman just waving her arms frantically. And we had no way initially to get to them. They were down power lines. The power lines were live, and there was no physical way that we could get around them. So we ran about 50 to 100 yards east along Highway 50, and we finally found an opening that we could get in. The power lines were maybe 6 feet or so above the ground. They were about my height, so it was roughly 6 feet. So we army crawled underneath the power lines, and we just darted to the house to help these people. We come up to the house to two elderly women. One she was standing, but she had a cut on her head, and there was another woman who was trapped underneath the collapsed wall. And we didn't know if she couldn't move. We didn't know if her back, her spine was injured or whatnot. So we stayed with the two elderly women. They were 86 and 95 years old, and the elderly woman trapped underneath the wall was 95 years old. The hail core of the storm wrapped back around, and my friend and I got hit with golf ball sized hailstones, protecting the elder woman. There was no roof, so there was nowhere we could go to shelter them. So we grabbed blankets, we grabbed what we could. Basically, I grabbed it was like a tablecloth. I just put it over this elderly woman, and I just grabbed a cushion, put it over her head, and I just shielded her with my body as my friend and I got hit with golf ball sized hailstones. And after the hail core passed, we were finally able to get through to 911 after multiple attempts. And eventually the paramedics and firefighters were able to find an opening in the power lines after figuring out a way to get their emergency vehicles through. And they were able to get the two elderly women to the hospital, and miraculously they were released the following day in fair condition. It was truly miraculous that they survived. I was able to ask the one woman who was standing. She was in shock, but she knew what happened. She knew where she was. I asked, "Did you see it coming?" And she said that they saw what was the drill bit tornado move off to the west, but they didn't realize that the low-hanging cloud there was the multi-vortex tornado. It was not condensed all the way to the ground, and there were these little vortices curving through the landscape, and that's what hit their house. There was a subvortex that curved right through their property and hit their house, because the houses immediately to their west and east, their neighbors, suffered some broken windows and some shingle damage. But here's a brick frame house that suffered major damage.
There were no major injuries and no fatalities on a violent tornadic afternoon. The Southwest Kansas Dodge City tornadoes of May 24th are still highly talked about on social media today, with fascinating photos and images swirling online. It ranks as our 6th biggest tornado event of 2016.
Do you think you might know what tornado event ranks as number 1? Next on Tornado Talk, we continue our countdown. It includes a powerful EF4 tornado that stayed on the ground for nearly 26 miles, and the tornado that claimed more lives than any other on Earth in 2016. We resume our countdown of the top 10 tornado events of 2016, number 5 through number 1 on episode 29 of Tornado Talk.